I'm Audrey Wilson, 34, and I built a multi-million-dollar company while my husband thought I was struggling financially. Brandon left me last month, calling me dead weight and broke. Little did he know about GreenWrap, my secret $5 million packaging company I'd built over 4 years of our marriage. The look on his face when he discovered the truth in our divorce mediation? Absolutely priceless. Trust is everything in a marriage, but so is respect. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against someone who underestimated you. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Denver, Colorado, I was always the kid with the lemonade stand that actually turned a profit. While other children spent their allowances on candy and toys, I saved mine, calculating interest rates in a little notebook my father had given me. By 13, I had expanded from lemonade to handmade beaded jewelry that I sold to classmates and at local craft fairs. My parents, both teachers, encouraged my entrepreneurial spirit but also emphasized education. When I turned 16, I started a neighborhood lawn mowing business, hiring 2 friends and keeping meticulous records of expenses and revenue. My parents' garage became my first office, with a folding table where I tracked schedules and payments. By graduation, I had saved enough to cover half of my college tuition, which impressed my parents who had been setting aside money for my education since I was born. At Colorado State University, I majored in business management with a minor in environmental sustainability. The combination seemed unusual to some, but I had always believed that future businesses would need to prioritize environmental responsibility. During my senior year, I developed a business plan for eco-friendly packaging alternatives that won second place in a statewide competition. That plan would later become the foundation of GreenWrap, though I didn't know it yet. I met Brandon Taylor 3 years after graduation at my college roommate Heather's housewarming party. He arrived fashionably late, wearing an expensive watch and carrying a bottle of champagne that cost more than my entire outfit. When he entered the room, I noticed him immediately, tall, confident, with a winning smile that he flashed generously around the room. When our eyes met, something clicked. He made his way to me, introduced himself, and spent the rest of the evening by my side. "I sell dreams," he told me when I asked about his career, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm a real estate agent specializing in luxury properties." He spoke about multi-million-dollar homes with infinity pools and wine cellars as if they were everyday purchases. His ambition and confidence were magnetic, and by the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. Our romance progressed quickly. Brandon took me to restaurants I could never afford on my own, working at a small marketing firm at the time, and weekend getaways to mountain resorts. He drove a sleek black BMW and wore tailored suits. When he talked about his future, it always involved more properties, more clients, more commission. I admired his drive, even if his focus on material success sometimes made me uncomfortable. 6 months after we met, Brandon proposed with a diamond ring that made my friends gasp. He wanted a big wedding, to establish our place in society, he said, and I went along with it. His parents paid for most of it, though I insisted on contributing what I could from my savings. The ceremony was at one of Denver's most prestigious hotels, with 200 guests, many of whom were Brandon's clients and business associates I had never met. After our honeymoon in Bali, we bought our first home together, a 4-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood that Brandon insisted we needed for appearances. I was hesitant about the mortgage, but he assured me his income could cover it. We established joint accounts for household expenses, but I maintained a separate personal account, a decision that annoyed Brandon but which I insisted on as my independence fund. "Why do you need separate money?" he asked one night as we were paying bills. "We're married now. What's mine is yours." "It's just a habit from growing up," I explained, not wanting to admit that his spending habits made me nervous. "My parents always taught me to have my own safety net." He shrugged it off, but I noticed how he checked the price tag on everything I bought afterward, commenting if something seemed too expensive or too cheap. When I brought home a new dress for a client dinner, he asked to see the receipt. "Nordstrom Rack?" he said with a slight frown. "We can afford better than that, Audrey." You represent me when we're out with my colleagues." It was the first time I felt like an accessory to his success rather than a partner, but I dismissed the feeling. Every relationship required compromise, I told myself. And besides, I was beginning to formulate a plan for my own business, one that would fulfill my dream of combining profit with purpose. I just wasn't ready to share it with Brandon yet, not until I was sure it could succeed. The signs of Brandon's materialism became more obvious as we settled into married life. He categorized our social circle by income and job titles, dropping friends who didn't match his standard of success. When we hosted dinner parties, he would give tours of our home, pointing out the brand names of our furniture and appliances. I found it embarrassing, but he insisted it was networking. "Perception is reality in my business," he would say whenever I questioned the necessity of his expensive purchases. "People need to see success to believe in it." I began to wonder if I measured up to his ideal image. Though he never said it directly, his subtle comments about my career at the marketing firm suggested he had expected me to aim higher. Little did he know, I was already laying the groundwork for something much bigger than he could imagine, something that would ultimately reveal the true nature of our marriage. 6 months into our marriage, while Brandon focused on climbing the real estate ladder, I was quietly developing the business plan I had first conceptualized in college. GreenWrap would produce eco-friendly packaging materials made from agricultural waste products like corn husks and sugarcane fibers. The sustainable packaging industry was growing, but most alternatives to plastic were still too expensive for widespread adoption. I believed I had found a manufacturing process that could reduce costs while maintaining quality. Every night after Brandon fell asleep, I would slip out of bed and head to our home office. From midnight until 2 or 3 in the morning, I researched suppliers, manufacturing processes, and potential clients. I created spreadsheets projecting startup costs and potential revenue streams. Using $25,000 from my personal savings, money I had set aside before meeting Brandon, I registered the business, secured a basic website domain, and began the patent application process for my manufacturing technique. The first time Brandon questioned my late nights, I told him I was working on a marketing project for a new client. He seemed satisfied with the explanation, especially when I added that it might lead to a raise. His interest in my career extended only as far as its financial contribution to our lifestyle, which, though hurtful, worked to my advantage as I built my company in secret. At an entrepreneurship conference I attended for work, I met Stephanie Hayes, an operations manager with experience in manufacturing and distribution. We connected immediately over our shared passion for sustainable business practices. Over coffee, I shared my vision for GreenWrap. "This could revolutionize the industry," Stephanie said, examining my prototype samples. "The texture is better than anything I've seen at this price point." "I need someone with your expertise," I admitted. "I understand the concept and the market, but the operational logistics are outside my experience." By the end of our third meeting, Stephanie had agreed to come on board as a co-founder and operations director, taking a reduced salary in exchange for equity. Her belief in my vision validated all the late nights and secret planning. With Stephanie's help, I found a small, affordable warehouse space in an industrial district outside Denver. To Brandon, I explained my increased absences as a promotion that required more hours. He was pleased about the supposed career advancement but showed no interest in visiting my workplace or learning more about my projects. "Just make sure you're not too tired for the Hendersons' dinner party on Saturday," he said when I mentioned my new work schedule. "Robert Henderson just listed a property in Cherry Creek, and I want to make a good impression." His dismissive attitude stung, but it also reinforced my decision to keep GreenWrap separate from our home life. I couldn't risk his skepticism or, worse, his attempt to take control of my vision. This was my dream, and I needed to prove to myself that I could make it succeed on my own terms. The breakthrough came 4 months after Stephanie joined. A local organic grocery chain, Mountain Harvest, was looking to rebrand with more sustainable packaging. Their purchasing manager, Daniel Kelly, agreed to meet with us after seeing our prototypes at a trade show. "We've been searching for exactly this kind of solution," Daniel said, examining our corn-based food containers. Our customers want sustainability, but our margins can't absorb the premium prices of current alternatives. After 2 more meetings and a successful product trial, Mountain Harvest signed a contract for a limited product line. The purchase order wasn't huge, but it was enough to validate our concept and begin small-scale production. I celebrated by taking Stephanie to dinner at a restaurant across town, far from anywhere Brandon might be with clients. As we toasted our first major client, Stephanie asked the question I had been avoiding: "When are you going to tell your husband about GreenWrap?" I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the burgundy liquid catch the light. He wouldn't understand. Brandon measures success in brand names and status symbols. GreenWrap isn't impressive enough yet. You just landed a contract that most startups would kill for, Stephanie pointed out. To Brandon, it would just be a side project taking attention away from what he considers a real career, I replied, remembering how he had once described my college friend's bakery business as playing with flour and sugar. With Mountain Harvest's order as proof of concept, we hired 3 employees, a production manager and 2 packaging specialists. I opened a separate bank account for the business under my maiden name, Wilson, rather than my married name, Taylor. Each decision took me further down a path of separate lives, entrepreneur by day, real estate agent's wife by night. The irony wasn't lost on me that as GreenWrap grew, my marriage seemed to shrink. Conversations with Brandon became perfunctory exchanges about schedules and social obligations. He never asked about my day beyond whether I had received the raise that I had fabricated to explain my occasional purchases of new business clothes. By the end of our first year of operations, GreenWrap had secured 5 regular clients and was barely breaking even, a significant achievement for a startup. I worked 60-hour weeks while maintaining the appearance of a normal 9-to-5 job. The stress took its toll. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and caught every cold that circulated. Brandon noticed only that I wasn't as available for his social events. "You need to tell your boss to back off," he said one evening as I begged off yet another dinner with his colleagues, citing exhaustion. "This job is consuming you, and for what? Your last raise was what, 4%? That barely covers inflation." I bit back the truth that threatened to spill out, that I was building something meaningful, something with the potential to make a real difference in the world. Instead, I nodded and promised to speak to my imaginary boss. The emotional toll of keeping such a significant secret from my husband weighed heavily on me. Each milestone achieved at GreenWrap was celebrated only with my business partner and employees, never with the person who had vowed to be my life partner. Sometimes, lying in bed next to Brandon, I would wonder if I was being unfair to him. But then he would make another comment about someone's worthless startup that would never turn a profit, and my resolve to keep GreenWrap separate would strengthen. What had started as a temporary measure until the business proved viable had become a wall between us, brick by brick, secret by secret. I told myself I would tell him when the time was right, when GreenWrap was successful enough to impress him. But as the months passed, that threshold of success kept moving, and the right time never seemed to arrive. 3 years into our marriage, Brandon and I lived increasingly separate lives despite sharing the same home. His career in real estate had flourished, he had become one of the top-selling agents in Denver's luxury market. My apparent career at what he thought was a marketing firm seemed stagnant in comparison, though in reality, GreenWrap was growing steadily. The distance between us wasn't just about our diverging career paths. Brandon's materialism had intensified with his success. He traded in his BMW for a Maserati, replaced our living room furniture with Italian leather pieces, and began collecting expensive watches. Each purchase was justified as an investment or necessary for client relations. "Image is everything in this business," became his mantra, repeated so often I could mouth the words along with him. When Brandon received a major promotion at his real estate firm, becoming a partner at age 36, his spending reached new heights. He insisted on renovating our kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances and custom cabinetry, though our existing kitchen was perfectly functional. The $40,000 renovation was an investment in our home value, he explained, but the real purpose was to host more elaborate dinner parties for potential clients. Meanwhile, GreenWrap had achieved a significant milestone. Our patent for an innovative biodegradable packaging process was finally approved after 18 months of applications and revisions. The proprietary technology, which used agricultural waste products to create packaging as durable as plastic but fully compostable within 90 days, positioned us uniquely in the market. Environmental publications began featuring our products, and inquiries from potential clients increased threefold. With Stephanie's operational expertise and my business development efforts, annual revenue crossed the $1 million mark. We expanded to 15 employees and moved to a larger facility to accommodate growing production demands. Though we were reinvesting most profits back into the business, GreenWrap was officially profitable, and my personal income from the company now exceeded what Brandon thought I earned at my marketing job. I maintained the deception through careful financial management. My GreenWrap income went into a separate account at a different bank than the one we used for joint expenses. I contributed the exact amount to our household that would be expected from my fictitious marketing salary. The rest I reinvested or saved. Brandon, focused on his own career and social climbing, never questioned the arrangement. The strain of maintaining separate lives was taking its toll, however. I was constantly juggling schedules, manufacturing excuses for my absences, and diverting business calls when Brandon was nearby. The mental energy required to sustain the deception left me exhausted and emotionally distant. One evening, as I prepared to leave for an emergency meeting with a manufacturing partner, Brandon confronted me in our bedroom. "Another late meeting?" he asked, his voice tinged with annoyance. "That's the third this week. What kind of marketing firm has this many emergencies?" "We're launching a new campaign," I lied, hating how easily the falsehoods now came to me. "The client is very demanding." Brandon loosened his tie and tossed it onto the bed. "You should consider looking for a new job. This one is going nowhere. Kelly Thompson's wife just started at that new tech firm downtown, base salary of $90,000 plus stock options." I felt a familiar anger rise within me. "I like my job, Brandon. It's challenging and meaningful." He snorted. "Meaningful doesn't pay for vacations or retirement. You need to be more ambitious, Audrey. You're smarter than most of those people at your company. Why are you settling for middle management at a firm nobody's ever heard of?" "Not everyone measures success by salary," I replied, zipping up my laptop bag with more force than necessary. "That's what people who aren't successful say," he shot back. "Look, I'm just saying you could do better. That packaging company you work with sometimes, what's it called?" My heart skipped a beat. "GreenWrap?" "Yeah, that one. Kelly mentioned they're doing well. Maybe they're hiring for marketing positions. At least it would be a step up from your current place." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. My own husband was suggesting I apply for a job at my own company, completely unaware that I was its founder and CEO. Part of me wanted to tell him right then, to see the shock on his face when he realized what I had built while he was busy judging my career choices. But another part of me, the part that had grown weary of his materialism and status obsession, held back. Instead, I simply said, "I'll think about it," and left for my meeting. The arguments about finances became more frequent. Brandon began pressuring me to contribute more to our joint account as his spending increased. When I pointed out that my salary hadn't increased proportionally to his, he suggested I wasn't trying hard enough to advance my career. "Maybe you should take some additional courses or certifications," he said one night during a particularly heated discussion about our vacation budget. "Something to make yourself more marketable." "I don't need to be more marketable," I replied truthfully. "I'm good at what I do." "But clearly not good enough to move up," he countered. "You've been at the same level for what, 2 years now? That says something, Audrey." His condescension burned. I wanted to tell him about the multi-million-dollar contract negotiations I was currently leading, about the team of professionals who respected my leadership, about the innovative products I had helped develop. Instead, I swallowed my pride and ended the conversation by agreeing to look for ways to increase my income. As Brandon's disrespect for my perceived career grew, so did my resentment. I began to consider revealing the truth about GreenWrap, but each time I came close, his dismissive comments about small businesses or environmental do-gooders made me hesitate. I feared that rather than respecting my achievement, he would try to capitalize on it, to absorb my success into his narrative or, worse, to exert control over the company I had built. The emotional isolation became my daily reality. At GreenWrap, I was a respected leader making important decisions and driving innovation. At home, I was increasingly treated as a financial disappointment and career underachiever. The woman Brandon believed he had married, the marketing employee with modest ambitions, was a fiction that was becoming harder to maintain as GreenWrap's success grew. Late at night, after Brandon had gone to bed, I would sometimes sit in our home office and wonder how we had reached this point. I had started keeping GreenWrap secret out of a desire to prove myself independently, but the deception had taken on a life of its own. Now, 3 years in, telling the truth seemed impossible without admitting to years of lies. The realization that my marriage had become a facade was painful, but even more painful was the recognition that perhaps it had always been built on superficial values rather than genuine connection and respect. After 4 years of operation, GreenWrap reached a turning point when Eco-Retail, a national chain of environmentally conscious stores with locations in 27 states, approached us about becoming their exclusive packaging provider. The $2 million contract would more than double our annual revenue and establish us as a major player in the sustainable packaging industry. The negotiations were intense, requiring multiple late nights and early mornings with our legal team and Eco-Retail's procurement officers. When the contract was finally signed, the validation of everything we had worked for over the past 4 years was overwhelming. GreenWrap was now valued at approximately $5 million, with several acquisition offers from larger packaging companies already on the table. To celebrate this milestone, I organized a dinner for our entire team at Altitude, one of Denver's most exclusive restaurants. It was a risk. Brandon sometimes took clients there, but the team deserved a proper celebration, and I was tired of hiding our success in out-of-the-way locations. The evening was magical. 23 employees, from production staff to management, dressed in their finest, toasting the future of GreenWrap with champagne. Stephanie gave a touching speech about our journey from a 2-person operation in a tiny warehouse to our current success. When it was my turn to speak, I fought back tears as I thanked everyone for their dedication and belief in our vision. 4 years ago, GreenWrap was just an idea, a belief that we could create packaging that was good for both business and the planet, I said, raising my glass. Today, because of your talent and hard work, that idea is a $5 million reality with a future brighter than we ever imagined. This is just the beginning. The applause and cheers from my team filled me with a pride I had rarely experienced. For once, I wasn't thinking about keeping up appearances or meeting Brandon's expectations of success. I was simply present, celebrating a genuine achievement with people who understood its value. The celebration ran late, with impromptu speeches and multiple toasts. By the time I arrived home, it was after midnight. I expected Brandon to be asleep, but as I quietly entered our bedroom, the lamp switched on, revealing him sitting upright against the headboard, his face tense with anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I've been calling you for hours." I realized I had silenced my phone during dinner and forgotten to check it afterward. "I had a work event. I told you earlier this week I'd be out late tonight." "Until midnight? What kind of marketing meeting runs until midnight on a Wednesday?" He threw back the covers and stood up. "And you smell like champagne. Since when does your company splurge on champagne for staff?" "It was a special celebration," I said, suddenly too tired for the deception. "We landed a major client." Brandon scoffed. "Your firm landed a client, and they included you in the celebration? How generous of them to let the middle managers have a sip of champagne." His condescension ignited something in me. "It was a significant achievement," I said, my voice stronger than I intended. "Something I worked hard for." "Please," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Your company makes brochures for local businesses. It's hardly revolutionary work. He paced the room, his expensive silk pajamas, a recent indulgence, shimmering under the lamplight. Meanwhile, I just lost the Henderson listing to Diane Murray because I couldn't reach you when they had questions about the offer. That's a $40,000 commission, Audrey. Gone. I'm sorry about your commission, I said, not entirely sincerely. But my career matters too. Career? Brandon laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Let's be realistic. You have a job, not a career. A job that barely contributes to our household. I contribute exactly what we agreed upon, I countered, hanging up my coat with deliberate care to hide my shaking hands. That was when I thought you'd advance, he said. It's been 4 years, Audrey. 4 years in the same position while I've become a partner. I'm carrying us financially, and I'm tired of it. The injustice of his statement was staggering. If he only knew that my company's value now exceeded his annual income many times over. I pay my share of our expenses, I said carefully. Barely, he snapped. And what about the future? The lifestyle we talked about? The vacation home in Aspen? The early retirement? At the rate you're going, we'll never get there. Maybe those are your dreams, not mine, I said softly. Brandon stopped pacing and stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. What's happened to you? When we met, you had ambition. Now you're content being mediocre. The word hung in the air between us, so far from the truth that I almost laughed. Instead, I took a deep breath. I'm not mediocre, Brandon. I'm just not measuring success by the same metrics you are. Well, someone has to think about our financial future, he continued, his voice rising. I'm tired of carrying dead weight in this marriage. Do you know how it feels when my colleagues' wives are executives and doctors, and mine is stuck in a dead-end marketing job? Each word cut deeper than the last. Dead weight? I repeated, my voice barely audible. Financially speaking, yes, he said, his tone matter of fact. I make 6 times what you do. I pay for every vacation, every renovation, every significant purchase. You contribute the bare minimum while I build our future. In that moment, something broke inside me, the last thread of hope that Brandon valued me beyond material measures. Is that all our marriage is to you? A financial arrangement? He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. Of course not. But marriage is a partnership, and partners should contribute equally, or at least try to. You seem content to stay exactly where you are, broke and unambitious. Broke? The word, so wildly inaccurate, struck me like a physical blow. Relatively speaking, he clarified, though his tone suggested he meant it literally. Look, I've been thinking about this for a while. I need someone who shares my vision for the future, who has the drive to achieve at my level. I'm sorry, Audrey, but I don't think that's you anymore. The finality in his voice made my stomach drop. What are you saying? Brandon looked directly at me, his expression resolute. I think we should separate. I've already spoken with a lawyer. I'll be generous in the settlement. I know you can't afford much on your own with your current salary. The condescension in his offer of generosity was the final insult. Years of hiding my success, of downplaying my achievements to protect his ego, had led to this moment, my husband leaving me because he thought I was financially unsuccessful. You've already spoken with a lawyer? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Behind my back? I didn't see the point in dragging it out, he replied. It's better this way, a clean break. You'll be fine, Audrey. You can keep the Honda, and I'll help with rent for a few months until you get on your feet. His cavalier planning of my post-divorce life, based entirely on his misconceptions about my financial situation, left me speechless. As he continued outlining his generous concessions, I walked to the guest room and closed the door, cutting off his voice mid-sentence. Alone in the dark, I finally let the tears come, not for the end of my marriage, but for the realization that it had been built on illusions from the start. Brandon had never truly seen me, had never valued what I valued. The ambitious, driven woman who had built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing sat in the guest room of her own home, being discarded for the crime of being broke. The irony was both painful and darkly comical. The next morning, I awoke to the sounds of drawers opening and closing. By the time I emerged from the guest room, Brandon had packed several suitcases. He informed me he would be staying at a fellow realtor's vacant rental property until arrangements were finalized. "I think it's best if we communicate through our lawyers from now on," he said, his tone businesslike. "Mine will be in touch about the division of assets." "Don't worry," as I said, "I'll be fair." As he loaded his luggage into his Maserati, I stood in the doorway, still too shocked and hurt to form a coherent response. The man I had married, who had promised to love me for better or worse, was leaving because my perceived financial contribution to our marriage didn't meet his standards. After Brandon drove away, I closed the door and slid down against it until I sat on the floor, my mind strangely empty. I had built a successful company while maintaining a facade at home, and now that home was shattered. The relief I should have felt at no longer needing to live a double life was overshadowed by the raw pain of rejection. For a week, I barely left the house except to mechanically go through the motions at GreenWrap. I told Stephanie and the team that I was dealing with personal issues but provided no details. At night, I would wander through the house that suddenly felt too large and too filled with expensive things that held no meaning for me. I ignored calls from friends and family, unable to explain a separation that was based on such a fundamental misunderstanding. The devastation was not about losing Brandon. I had been losing him gradually for years as his materialism grew and our values diverged. The true devastation came from the recognition that I had participated in the lie that ultimately destroyed us. By hiding my success to protect his ego, I had denied both of us the chance at an authentic relationship. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow in the lonely aftermath of his departure. On the 10th day after Brandon left, Stephanie showed up at my door unannounced, a bottle of wine in one hand and a bag of takeout in the other. "You've been avoiding me at work," she said, brushing past me into the house. "And you look terrible. I'm calling an intervention." In the kitchen, she uncorked the wine while I unpacked containers of Thai food. The familiar domestic activity was oddly comforting after days of isolation. "Brandon left me," I said abruptly, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "He thinks I'm financially unsuccessful and a drain on his resources." Stephanie stopped mid-pour, the wine bottle suspended over the glass. "He what?" "He called me deadweight and broke. Said he needs someone who can contribute equally to their future." For a moment, Stephanie stared at me in disbelief. Then, to my surprise, she burst into laughter, a full-bodied, head-thrown-back laugh that echoed through my quiet kitchen. "I'm sorry," she gasped, noting my hurt expression. "It's not funny. It's just, the CEO of a $5 million company being called broke by her husband who has no idea who she really is. It's so absurd it's almost magnificent." Put that way, I could see the dark humor in the situation. A reluctant smile tugged at my lips, the first in days. "He's leaving me his Honda," I said, the ridiculousness of it suddenly hitting me. "To help me get back on my feet." This sent us both into peals of laughter that bordered on hysteria, tears streaming down our faces as years of tension found release. When we finally composed ourselves, Stephanie refilled our wine glasses and fixed me with a serious look. "Audrey, this is actually the best thing that could have happened." "Being left by my husband is the best thing?" I asked skeptically. "Being freed from a man who never saw or valued the real you?" "Absolutely." She took a sip of her wine. "You've been hiding your light for years to avoid outshining him. Do you realize how exhausting that's been? How much energy you've poured into maintaining a lie instead of celebrating your incredible achievements?" Her words struck a chord. The constant vigilance, the separate accounts, the careful calculations of what I could buy or say without raising suspicion, it had been draining me for years. "The question is," Stephanie continued, "what are you going to do now?" For the first time since Brandon's departure, I felt a spark of something other than despair, a flicker of anger, of indignation, of self-respect. "I don't know yet," I admitted. But I'm done hiding. That's my girl, Stephanie said with a satisfied nod. The Audrey Wilson I know doesn't curl up and disappear when life gets hard. She builds multi-million-dollar companies while juggling a double life. She raised her glass. To the real Audrey, brilliant, determined, and anything but broke. That night, after Stephanie left, I sat in my home office surrounded by the financial documents I had kept hidden for years, bank statements, investment portfolios, GreenWrap's valuation reports. The evidence of my success, of my worth, lay before me in black and white. Brandon had measured my value and found it wanting, but only because he had been measuring a fiction I had helped create. The next morning, I called Patricia Bennett, one of Denver's top divorce attorneys. Her reputation for handling high-profile separations with discretion and ruthless efficiency was exactly what I needed. My husband thinks I'm a financially unsuccessful marketing manager, I explained after outlining the basics of my situation. In reality, I'm the founder and CEO of GreenWrap Sustainable Packaging, currently valued at $5 million. There was a pause on the line before Patricia responded, Mrs. Taylor, I believe this may be the most interesting initial consultation I've had all year. I think we should meet in person as soon as possible. Later that week, over coffee in her sleek downtown office, Patricia reviewed my financial documentation with raised eyebrows. Your husband really has no idea about any of this? None, I confirmed. He believes I make $45,000 a year at a marketing firm. And all of this, she gestured to the GreenWrap documents, was built during your marriage? Yes, using my premarital savings as startup capital. Every decision, every account, every legal document has been in my name only. Brandon was never involved. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Colorado is an equitable distribution state, which doesn't necessarily mean equal. Given that he was completely uninvolved in the business and unaware of its existence, we have a strong case for keeping GreenWrap entirely separate from marital assets. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lifting. So legally, he has no claim to my company? I can't promise anything until I see what his lawyer presents, but based on what you've shown me, I'd say your company is well protected. She smiled. What I'm more interested in is his reaction when he learns about it. As we developed our legal strategy, I also began reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my marriage. Many were surprised to learn about GreenWrap, having believed, like Brandon, that I worked at a marketing firm. Their reactions to the truth ranged from shocked to impressed to concerned about the deception, but all were supportive of my current situation. My closest friend, Laura, summed it up best, I always wondered why you downplayed your work whenever Brandon was around. Now it makes sense, you were protecting his ego instead of celebrating your success. 2 weeks after Brandon's departure, the business magazine Sustainable Futures published a feature article on GreenWrap titled The Future of Packaging, How One Woman's Vision is Changing an Industry. The 4-page spread included photos of our production facility, interviews with key team members, and a prominent profile of me as founder and CEO, complete with professional headshots and a detailed account of our company's growth from startup to industry innovator. I hadn't sought out the publicity, the article had been in the works for months as part of the magazine's series on sustainable businesses, but its timing couldn't have been more serendipitous. Within days of publication, the article was being shared across industry networks and social media platforms. The morning after the magazine hit newsstands, I received a call from an unexpected source, Brandon's sister, Jennifer. Audrey? Her voice sounded hesitant. I just saw an article about you and your company. Is it real? It's real, I confirmed, bracing myself for her reaction. $5 million, she asked, her tone a mixture of disbelief and something else, respect, perhaps. Brandon said you were, well, he implied you were struggling financially. I know what Brandon thinks, I replied evenly. He never knew about GreenWrap. But why wouldn't you tell him? The genuine confusion in her voice reminded me that from an outsider's perspective, my deception might seem incomprehensible. It's complicated, I said, not ready to share the full story with her. But everything in that article is true. There was a long pause before Jennifer spoke again. He's been telling everyone that he left because you weren't ambitious enough, that you were holding him back financially. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. I'm so sorry, Audrey. I had no idea. The confirmation that Brandon was actively spreading a false narrative about our separation stung, but it also crystallized something in my mind. This was no longer just about protecting my assets in the divorce, it was about reclaiming my narrative, my truth, my pride in what I had built. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, I found myself filled with a strange combination of sadness and strength. The marriage I had believed in was over, but in its place was growing a new confidence, not in GreenWrap's success or my financial security, but in my own worth beyond material measures. With the feature article circulating and Brandon's false narrative spreading among our social circle, the stage was set for a confrontation that would finally bring the truth to light. As I prepared for our first mediation meeting, I found myself oddly calm. For the first time in our relationship, I would be meeting Brandon as my authentic self, successful, confident, and anything but broke. The office of Williams & Associates, the mediation firm chosen by our lawyers, occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise with views of the Rocky Mountains. I arrived early, dressed in a navy blue suit that I had purchased with GreenWrap profits but had told Brandon was a hand-me-down from Laura. Patricia Bennett walked beside me, her presence reassuring as we were shown to the conference room. Remember, Patricia murmured as we took our seats, let me do most of the talking initially. The financial documentation speaks for itself. I nodded, arranging my portfolio on the polished mahogany table. Inside was a copy of the Sustainable Futures magazine featuring GreenWrap, bank statements from my business accounts, and valuation reports from independent financial analysts. The evidence of my success lay hidden in plain sight, waiting to be revealed. At precisely 10 o'clock, Brandon entered with his attorney, Maxwell Hoffman, a man known for representing high-earning professionals in divorce cases. Brandon looked immaculate as always, tailored suit, expensive watch, hair perfectly styled. His expression shifted from confident to confused when he saw me sitting calmly at the table, dressed not as the financially struggling wife he expected, but as the successful businesswoman I was. Audrey, he said with a nod, his tone containing a hint of condescension that I now recognized had always been there. You look different. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Taylor, Patricia interjected smoothly. Shall we begin? Maxwell nodded, opening his briefcase with practiced efficiency. My client has prepared a generous settlement offer that takes into account Mrs. Taylor's limited financial resources. We believe it's more than fair given the circumstances. Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Before we discuss Mr. Taylor's offer, I think there are some financial disclosures that need to be addressed. Brandon leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confidence. I provided complete documentation of my assets and income, he said. Everything is transparent on my end. I'm referring to Mrs. Taylor's assets, Patricia clarified, her tone pleasant but firm. Maxwell frowned. We're already aware of Mrs. Taylor's situation. The marketing position, the modest salary. My client has taken all of that into account in his offer. The moment had arrived. With steady hands, I opened my portfolio and removed the magazine, sliding it across the table until it rested in front of Brandon. The cover photo showed me standing in GreenWrap's production facility, arms crossed confidently, with the headline "Revolutionizing an Industry" emblazoned above. What's this? Brandon asked, picking up the magazine with a bemused expression that quickly transformed as he read the headline and saw my name. My company, I said simply, speaking directly to him for the first time since the meeting began. GreenWrap Sustainable Packaging. Currently valued at $5 million. Brandon's face went through a remarkable series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, a dawning comprehension that seemed to physically change his features. This is, you're the founder and CEO, I finished for him. Yes. Maxwell looked from the magazine to me, professional composure momentarily shaken. Mrs. Taylor, are you claiming to own this company? Patricia slid a folder of documents across the table. Not claiming, Mr. Hoffman. Mrs. Taylor has owned and operated GreenWrap since its founding 4 years ago. The company was established with her premarital assets and has been maintained completely separate from joint marital finances. All relevant documentation is included here: incorporation papers, bank statements, tax returns, and a current valuation report. Brandon stared at me, magazine still clutched in his hands. 4 years? You've been running this company for 4 years? Well, we were married? Yes, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. But, your marketing job. His voice trailed off as realization dawned. There was no marketing job, was there? No, I confirmed. GreenWrap has been my full-time focus since before we were married. Maxwell was rapidly flipping through the documentation, his expression growing more concerned with each page. These documents appear to be in order, he admitted reluctantly. But regardless of Mrs. Taylor's undisclosed assets, Colorado is an equitable distribution state. My client is entitled to. Mr. Hoffman, Patricia interrupted smoothly, as you'll see in Section 3 of the documentation, GreenWrap was funded entirely with Mrs. Taylor's premarital assets. Mr. Taylor has never participated in the business in any capacity, was unaware of its existence by his own choice, and has never contributed to its success. Furthermore, Mrs. Taylor has maintained completely separate finances for the business, never commingling funds with marital assets. While the lawyers discussed legal technicalities, Brandon continued to stare at me, his expression moving from shock to something more calculating. $5 million, he repeated softly. All this time. I simply nodded, watching as he processed the information. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked, his voice strained. It was the question I had anticipated, yet hearing it from him now, in this sterile conference room with lawyers as witnesses, the answer seemed both obvious and impossible to fully articulate. Would it have mattered? I asked instead. Would knowing I was financially successful have changed how you saw me, valued me? Of course it would have. He exclaimed, momentarily forgetting the professional setting. Do you know how hard I've been working, thinking I was carrying us financially? All the pressure I felt? Pressure you put on yourself, I pointed out. I never asked for the lifestyle you insisted upon. I contributed exactly what we agreed to for household expenses. The rest was your choice. Brandon leaned forward, lowering his voice. We could have been a power couple, Audrey. Combined our success. Why would you hide this from me? The genuine confusion in his question revealed how little he had ever understood me. Because GreenWrap wasn't about status or being a power couple. It was about creating something meaningful, something I believed in. And every time I considered telling you, you made another comment about hobby businesses or environmental initiatives being a waste of time unless they generated immediate profits. His expression shifted as he recalled his own dismissive remarks over the years. I never meant. You called me dead weight, I reminded him quietly. You left me because you thought I wasn't financially successful enough to be worthy of being your wife. Maxwell cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the personal turn the conversation had taken. Perhaps we should focus on the legal aspects of the separation. Given this new information? Wait, Brandon interrupted, his business mind finally catching up to the implications. Audrey, we can work this out. This changes everything. I was hasty in my decision. The naked calculation in his eyes was almost pitiful. The man who had walked out on me, who had belittled my perceived career and financial status, was now seeing dollar signs where before he had seen only disappointment. You're right, Brandon, I said, my voice steady. This does change everything. But not in the way you're thinking. I turned to Patricia and nodded, giving her the signal to proceed with our prepared statement. Mr. Hoffman, my client is prepared to be extremely generous in the divorce settlement, Patricia began. She will not seek any portion of Mr. Taylor's income or assets, nor will she request alimony of any kind. She asks only to retain full ownership of GreenWrap and her personal assets, which as we've demonstrated were never commingled with marital property. Maxwell looked stunned by the straightforward proposal. That's unexpectedly reasonable, he admitted cautiously. Brandon's face, however, had clouded over as he realized I wasn't suggesting reconciliation. You can't be serious, he said. After building a life together for 4 years, you're just walking away? Isn't that exactly what you did 2 weeks ago? I asked quietly. You decided our marriage wasn't financially advantageous enough and walked out. Nothing has changed except your perception of my bank account. I made a mistake, he insisted, reaching across the table toward my hand. I pulled back before he could touch me. I was stressed about work, about our future. But this, he gestured to the magazine, this changes everything. I always believed in you, Audrey. Always knew you had potential. The transparent insincerity of his about-face might once have hurt me. Now it only confirmed what I already knew, that Brandon had never seen me, only what I could contribute to his vision of success. You believed in me so much that you left when you thought I wasn't successful enough, I said, my voice cool but not unkind. That's not love or partnership, Brandon. That's a business arrangement with terms I never agreed to. The mediator, who had been quietly observing until now, finally spoke. Perhaps we should take a brief recess for everyone to process this new information. 20 minutes? As we filed out of the conference room, Brandon caught up with me in the hallway. Audrey, please. We need to talk privately. This whole thing has been a misunderstanding. I turned to face him, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. The charismatic man I had fallen in love with was still there, but now I could also see the calculation behind the charm, the self-interest beneath the ambition. There's no misunderstanding, Brandon. You showed me exactly who you are and what you value when you left. The only difference now is that I finally believe you. Without waiting for his response, I walked to the window at the end of the hallway, gazing out at the mountains that had witnessed my journey from new bride to successful entrepreneur to woman standing firmly on her own. Behind me, I heard Brandon's footsteps retreat, and with them went the last remnants of a marriage built on illusions rather than truth. The divorce was finalized 3 months after that mediation meeting. True to our agreement, I retained full ownership of GreenWrap and my personal assets, while Brandon kept his real estate earnings and investments. The house, technically affordable for either of us alone, was sold and the proceeds divided equally, a clean break from the shared space that had contained so many secrets. Signing the final papers brought a complex mix of emotions. There was relief, certainly, at no longer living a double life. The mental energy I had expended maintaining my secret could now be channeled fully into GreenWrap's growth. But there was also a deep sadness at the failure of what I had once believed was a loving partnership. No matter how justified the ending, divorce represents a death of sorts, the death of shared dreams, of a future once imagined together. How do you feel? Stephanie asked as we shared a quiet dinner the evening after the divorce was finalized. I considered the question carefully. Lighter, I finally said. Like I put down a heavy backpack I didn't realize I was carrying. The burden of deception had been heavier than I'd acknowledged. Every careful calculation, every diverted business call, every explanation for my absences, each had added weight to my shoulders. Now, for the first time in years, I could simply be myself in all aspects of my life. GreenWrap continued to thrive in the aftermath of my personal upheaval. The eco-retail contract led to interest from other national chains, and within 6 months of the divorce, we had expanded into international markets, beginning with Canada and the UK. Our proprietary biodegradable packaging process became the industry standard for companies prioritizing sustainability, and our valuation climbed steadily. Success brought its own challenges, of course. We needed to scale production quickly to meet demand, which meant hiring more staff and expanding our facilities. I found myself working longer hours than ever, but the work was fulfilling in a way my marriage had not been for years. Each decision was made openly, each achievement celebrated publicly, each challenge faced without pretense. Brandon's attempts to reconnect began about 2 months after the divorce was finalized. First came text messages expressing regret, then emails detailing how he had reflected on his priorities. When these went unanswered, he sent an elaborate flower arrangement to my office with a card requesting dinner to talk about the future. I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home and did not respond to his invitation. Whatever future I was building now, it wouldn't include someone who had so fundamentally misunderstood and undervalued me. "He's been asking about you," Jennifer, Brandon's sister, told me during one of our occasional coffee meetups. To my surprise, she had reached out after the divorce, apologizing for her brother's behavior and expressing admiration for what I had built at GreenWrap. Our friendship, tentative at first, had grown into something genuine over shared interests in environmental sustainability. "What does he say?" I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. "That he made the biggest mistake of his life," she replied with a slight eye roll. "That he didn't appreciate what he had." "He didn't know what he had," I corrected gently. "That's the problem. He never really saw me, just what I could or couldn't contribute to his vision of success." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're right. Brandon has always measured everything and everyone by financial value. Even as kids, he would calculate the worth of birthday presents." She smiled sadly. "I love my brother, but I'm glad you didn't go back to him. You deserve someone who values you for who you are, not what you're worth on paper." Her words stayed with me as I continued rebuilding my life post-divorce. With financial concerns no longer a consideration, I purchased a modest but beautiful home near a state park, prioritizing natural light and outdoor space over the status-driven features Brandon had insisted upon in our marital home. The simple pleasure of arranging my new space exactly as I wanted it, without considering anyone else's preferences or judgments, was unexpectedly healing. I also began reconnecting with parts of myself that had been sidelined during my marriage, taking painting classes, joining a hiking group, volunteering at an urban garden project. These activities had nothing to do with financial success or career advancement, they were purely for personal fulfillment and connection. 6 months after the divorce, I was representing GreenWrap at a sustainability conference when I literally collided with Brandon in the hotel lobby. He was there with clients, dressed impeccably as always, and the shock on his face mirrored my own. "Audrey," he said, recovering quickly and flashing the charming smile that had once made my heart race. "You look amazing." "Thank you," I replied politely, suddenly conscious of how different I must appear from the woman he had known. My hair was shorter now, my clothing more colorful, my posture more confident. "How are you, Brandon?" Good," he said, though something in his eyes suggested otherwise. "Business is booming. Just closed on a development in Cherry Creek." The familiar name-dropping of high-end neighborhoods was so predictable it almost made me smile. Some things never changed. "Congratulations," I said sincerely. Success in his career had always been important to Brandon, and I didn't begrudge him that. An awkward silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken history. Around us, conference attendees streamed past, oblivious to the weight of the moment. "I've been thinking about you," Brandon finally said, lowering his voice. "About us?" "I was wrong, Audrey. About so many things." I studied his face, the face I had once known better than my own. There was genuine regret there, perhaps even genuine feeling. But there was also calculation, the same assessment of value and potential return that characterized all his interactions. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied carefully. "But there is no us anymore, Brandon. And that's okay. We wanted different things from life, from partnership." "Is there someone else?" he asked, unable to hide the edge in his voice. The question made me realize how much Brandon still viewed relationships as possessions, as territories that could be marked and claimed. "There's me," I said simply. "I'm focusing on being someone I'm proud of, on building a life that feels meaningful." "That's enough for now." He nodded slowly, processing my words. "Your company is doing well. I see the GreenWrap logo everywhere these days." "It is," I confirmed. We just expanded into European markets. I always knew you had potential, he said, the statement so revisionist it would have been laughable if it weren't so sad. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. The Brandon I had married would never have imagined, let alone been proud of, a wife who out-earned him. His retroactive support was a fiction he was creating to preserve his self-image as the generous, supportive husband he had never actually been. Thank you, I said, choosing kindness over confrontation. I should get going, my panel starts in 20 minutes. As I turned to leave, Brandon reached for my arm. Can we get dinner sometime? To catch up properly? I gently moved out of his reach. I don't think that would be helpful for either of us, Brandon. I wish you well, truly. But we've both moved on to different lives. The flicker of surprise in his eyes confirmed what I had suspected, that he had expected me to jump at the chance to reconnect, that his very presence was an offer I should gratefully accept. The old Audrey might have done just that, prioritizing his needs and perceptions over my own well-being. But that woman was gone, transformed by both success and heartbreak into someone stronger and more self-aware. Take care of yourself, I said with a small smile before walking away, not looking back to see his reaction. That brief encounter, while uncomfortable, provided an unexpected sense of closure. I had faced Brandon as my authentic self, successful but also vulnerable, confident but not bitter. In doing so, I had finally stepped fully into the person I had been becoming all along, free from both the constraints of my marriage and the weight of my secrets. In the year that followed, GreenWrap continued its expansion, reaching a valuation of $10 million with interest from several major packaging conglomerates seeking acquisition. I remained committed to maintaining the company's independence and environmental mission, turning down offers that would have made me personally wealthy but might have compromised our values. My personal life blossomed alongside my professional success. I developed deep friendships with people who knew and appreciated the real me. I even began cautiously dating again, meeting Jason, an environmental science professor who valued my ambition as much as my compassion, who saw success not as a scorecard but as the ability to create positive impact. Looking back on the journey from hiding my success to embracing it fully, I recognized how the painful end of my marriage had ultimately freed me to live authentically. Brandon's departure, though initially devastating, had been the catalyst for integrating the compartmentalized parts of my life into a unified whole. The irony wasn't lost on me that Brandon had left believing he deserved better than a financially struggling wife, only to discover he had walked away from millions. But the true wealth I had gained wasn't measured in dollars, it was the richness of living truthfully, of being valued for who I was rather than what I owned or earned. One evening, as I sat on my back porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, I thought about the question Jennifer had asked me months earlier: do you regret not telling Brandon about GreenWrap from the beginning? At the time, I hadn't had a clear answer. Now, with the perspective of time and healing, I realized that while I regretted the deception itself, I didn't regret the outcome. Had Brandon known about GreenWrap's success, we might have stayed together in a marriage based on financial partnership rather than genuine connection and respect. The painful truth was better than a comfortable illusion. My phone chimed with a message from Jason, asking if I was still up for hiking this weekend. As I typed a quick affirmative response, I smiled at how different this relationship felt, the ease of being known and accepted, the absence of calculation or performance. The journey from hiding my success to embracing it had been painful but necessary. In losing a husband who valued me for what I could contribute to his vision, I had found myself, a woman whose worth wasn't determined by bank balances or balance sheets, but by the courage to live according to her own values, even when that meant standing alone. That, I realized as the last light faded from the mountains, was the true measure of success. If my story resonated with you today, I'd love to hear about a time you had to stand up for yourself or reveal your true worth to someone who underestimated you. Drop your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to help others find it. Share with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth beyond material measures. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your value isn't determined by anyone else's assessment. You are enough, just as you are,